Welcome back to the Fwstiva garage, guys. I've been asked to include detailed dimensions on my plates that I cut here. So here we go with that. I gave you every single dimension in case somebody doesn't know how to do math. Now this plate that I cut out, all I did was make a cardboard template by sticking a piece of cardboard up on the housing and traced it and cut it out. I didn't actually measure anything. I made a template, cut it out. As you can see, it's not actually perfect. However, this is not visual. The bumper covers it. All this is a structural piece of the car. As long as you can get the weld good and get the material on the car, you're fine. You don't have to be perfect at it. One thing to note is the overall length from right to left or left to right. As long as you're to the edge of the car, as long as you're to the bottom of the frame rail here, to the side of the frame rail, as long as you're up to this point, so that way you catch the edge of the frame rail on the inside that's rolled up. And as long as you at least catch the edge of the frame that's rolled over here, you're fine. You can make it wider if you want. You can make it taller if you want. I would not recommend making the plate up here. If we take a look back at Lucifer, you will notice that I made my plates significantly different. So here's the plate that I'm making now compared to what I made for Lucifer. So as you can see, my old plate, I think Pedro was the one that I got this plate design from. The plate is much bigger. However, what that does is that catches this edge here, it catches the bottom edge here, it misses the edge here, and it misses the end of the frame here on the inside. So if we go back to the new design, I can show you what I'm referring to here, hopefully. So if we look at where we're stopping here, and if we trace that around to the inside of the car, we're catching that same edge at the end of this lip. This lip on all three sides, that's the important lip. So taking your plate up through here does you no good because you're just welding to thin sheet metal. At least when you weld to here, when you take your plate to here, you're catching that second edge on the inside. So as long as you're getting good penetration on your weld and you're getting enough heat without burning through, you're going to catch that other plate in there, and you're going to get much stronger welds, much stronger support out of a thinner plate of metal. So you can go with 1/8 inch or 3/16 as opposed to a 1/4 inch like I did on Lucifer. Lucifer, I may even grind that weld off and redo that plate with a thinner metal. I don't know yet. That will be a whole different thing later on. So as long as you get this bottom weld, this inside weld, and this top weld, you're good. Those are the three welds that really stiffen that plate. The first time I went and did this plate, as I welded around these edges here, I could still bend this plate around and I could still move this plate independent of the chassis. It was only whenever I got this weld here and the weld on the inside that plate truly became rigid. So whatever you do, whatever design you use on your plate, you want to catch this bottom material here. This is where the most amount of material is. This is where your weld will be the strongest. And here. As long as you can get this weld up here as well, this plate will not move. It will not bend. It will not flex. If I try to flex this hard enough, I'm actually going to flex the chassis of the car, not the plate. So So it's all something to take into consideration whenever you're building these plates and doing this mod. On top of that, tonight we are going to cut our angle iron finally. I drew up the plate here. One thing to take note of is this corner, this whole cutout up here. You don't technically need this cutout. This corner here is kind of pointless. After I got to looking at it, this corner right here, it serves no purpose. I didn't gain anything by doing this corner. All I did was cost myself time of cutting the plate out and additional weld time. Well, same weld time. But this corner can be left solid if you want. It does not matter. I did it this way because this line of metal came through here and I caught that edge of the metal, just thinking maybe it would support more. However, after looking at it, it's not going to make a difference. So if you want to take this corner out, be my guest. This corner serves no purpose. It's this edge, and this bottom edge are the primary. This edge back here adds somewhat. On top of that edge, I don't know if I showed you or not, I did a couple of spot welds back here. These here. There's a couple of holes back here. I like to fill them in. I don't know if it's actually doing much. I just like to do it. I don't know, I did it on the first one. I've done it on every one. So now we're going to get busy cutting some angle iron. And our angle iron dimension will be from the far edge to the left of this plate to the far edge of the right side on that plate. And I'm actually going to cut the plate a little bit short for the angle iron. I'm going to cut the angle iron a little bit short, so that way when the angle iron comes up to here, it'll stop about a 1/4 inch short on each side. That way when I put my weld on, my weld really has a lot of grip on this edge. If you do a butt weld, then your weld it's still grabbing just as much, but it's not visually as pleasing, even though you'll never see it. It's just something I like to do. I don't like butt welds as much. A 90-degree weld is much more appealing to me, so that's just how I like to do it. However, a butt weld will suffice. It'll mean nothing different. I'll offset mine just a hair, just so that way I can have a pretty weld. I tend to weld 90s pretty well. I'm not big on butt welds, or whatever that weld is called. I don't know. I didn't take welding. So we'll pick the video back up and we'll show you some footage of that bar once cut up. Alrighty guys, the main beam is cut. We've got her clearanced out about a 1/2 inch, so that way the beam itself will drop down into the body more. That gives me better clearance for my bolts for the sway bar brackets. And I still have clearance on my motor mount down here. The angle iron that I will be welding in place back here will be welded in just like that. It'll be welded in on top of the core support. Once welded in place to the core support, then the core support will be clamped and welded to this plate, and I'll put a bead weld there along the side and along the bottom. Once that's done, this bar will not be moving, the chassis will not be moving, everything will be fixed in place, and we will have a very sturdy ride. Doing the cutout, this is about a 1/2 inch cutout here. Doing this cutout allows me to push this bar back into the body a little more. On the old design, I was all the way out here, and as you can see, this bolt just gets a little too close to the edge of the material. I prefer to have my bolt up in it as much as possible. So doing this design just allows me that much more clearance. Really what I could do is I could cut this back about, I don't know, 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch, re-weld this seam down here, get rid of this entire 3/8 chunk here. My edge here could be in another 1/2 inch, tighten it up to this plate, and then this bolt here would be nowhere near this corner. However, with everything being welded solid, I don't see this as being an issue. After all, we are going to have this plate in here, so there's going to be plenty of meat for this corner. And this is, again, 1/4 inch angle iron, so we've got plenty of strength in here. So we will pick the video back up here in a minute. Alright guys, we have a core support bar fabricated. Both sides are fully welded. I beveled both sides here as close to a 45 degrees I could eyeball it, and then I turned my welder up pretty significant. Its max pass is a 1/4 inch or right at for a single pass, so I did a single pass with both sides beveled pretty hard, and I just did a simple C pattern up, down, all the way across. I didn't take a pre-picture. That wasn't the prettiest weld. I've done better, I've done worse, but it's not coming apart. I didn't really grind any off as the weld stuck out pretty far. Like I said, my wire speed is up pretty high and the heat's up pretty high, so it did a really good job at penetrating and at putting a nice fillet on here. So I just took the top edge of the fillet off just so that way the front of the car looked nice and pretty. I did the same thing on the back side, so that way it would set up against the car nice and level. I do have good penetration, so that's not an issue. So there's no worry about, you know, I ground the weld off and it's going to break. I've done every single core support the same way, welding wise, and I haven't had a single one fail yet. I've done all of Blackwater the same way, and I haven't had a single weld crack on that car, and I've been beating the living tar out of that. So our core support bar is done. Next time we will drill the holes for the engine cross member and for the sway bar mount. Once the holes are drilled and everything is bolted back in place, then we will finish welding this bar in place and hit it with a little bit of silver spray paint just to stop it from rusting. For now, that's it. See you guys on the next episode.